A storm-swept night in the heart of Los Angeles, where the city's glittering skyline hides shadows deeper than the Pacific. A man known only as the Viper, ruler of an underground empire built on secrets, loyalty, and blood, steps into a crumbling apartment hallway. His world is one of power. Sleek suits hiding tattoos of serpents coiling around ancient symbols, deals struck in smoke-filled rooms where one wrong word means death. He's untouchable, or so he thinks. But tonight, something breaks through his armor. A soft, heartbreaking sob echoes from the end of the hall. He follows it, drawn like a moth to a forbidden flame. There, slumped against a door marked with a harsh eviction notice, is a woman, beautiful, resilient, her dark curls framing tear-streaked cheeks. She's packing her life into trash bags, the weight of betrayal and loss crushing her spirit. She doesn't see him at first, lost in her pain. He freezes. That voice, those eyes lifting to meet his, it's her. The girl from high school who once stood between him and a brutal beating, defending a boy everyone else dismissed as trash. 12 years later, fate twists the knife. This building, her prison of poverty? He owns it. Every brick, every lock. He could have ended her suffering months ago, if he'd known. But now, seeing her broken, the Viper feels a crack in his iron heart. What happens when a mafia king claims the one debt he can never repay? When protection turns to possession, and old sparks ignite in a world of rivals, revenge, and forbidden desire. Secrets will unravel, enemies will strike, and love might be the deadliest weapon of all. Stick around, you won't believe how this reunion explodes into chaos. If you love heart-pounding mafia romance with twists that hit like a gunshot, hit play now. This is Korean Mafia Boss finds the black girl who defended him in school crying, evicted tonight. Let's dive in. Min-jun Kim stood motionless in the flickering fluorescent light of the hallway, his tall frame casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the peeling wallpaper behind him. Rain hammered against the windows at either end of the corridor, creating a rhythm that matched the sudden thundering of his heart. He had come here on routine business, inspecting one of the many properties his organization owned throughout the city, never expecting the past to reach up and grab him by the throat. The woman on the floor hadn't noticed him yet. She was folding a winter coat with shaking hands, her movements careful despite the desperation radiating from every line of her body. Her dark curls were pulled back in a messy bun, revealing the elegant curve of her neck, the proud set of her shoulders even in defeat. Her ebony skin seemed to glow in the harsh light, and when she wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, Min-jun felt something in his chest constrict painfully. Divine Hayes. After all these years. He remembered her exactly as she had been at 17, standing in front of him in the school parking lot while 3 seniors advanced with baseball bats and cruel laughter. He had been nobody then, the quiet Korean kid who kept his head down, whose mother cleaned houses to keep them fed, whose bruises were as common as the contempt in his classmates' eyes. But Divine had stepped between them, all fire and fury, her voice ringing out across the asphalt. Touch him and I'll make sure everyone knows what cowards you really are. I got my phone recording. Try me. They had backed down. And Min-jun had never forgotten. Now 12 years later he was the Viper. The man who controlled half the underground operations in Los Angeles. The man people feared to even name aloud. He wore power like a second skin, custom suits tailored to hide the serpent tattoos that coiled up his arms and across his back, marks of his rise through the ranks of the Korean Mafia. He had money, influence, and enough blood on his hands to fill the Pacific Ocean. And yet, seeing Divine broken on the floor of this terrible building, he felt like that scared 17-year-old boy again. She finally sensed his presence. Her head snapped up, eyes widening in recognition despite the years that had carved him into someone harder, colder. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with unspoken history. Min-jun, she whispered, and her voice was exactly as he remembered it, rich and warm even when threaded with tears. He should have walked away. Involvement meant complications, and complications meant weakness. But his feet carried him forward until he stood over her, close enough to see the exhaustion bruising the delicate skin beneath her eyes. Divine Hayes, he said quietly, his voice carrying the faint accent he had never quite lost. His mind was already racing through the files his people had compiled on this building. He owned it through a shell corporation, 3 layers deep so the tenants never knew the Viper controlled their fates. The management company had been evicting people who fell behind on rent, standard procedure that Min-jun rarely paid attention to. He dealt in bigger pictures, darker schemes. But this was unacceptable. What are you doing here? She asked, climbing to her feet with a dignity that made his throat tight. She stood nearly a foot shorter than him but met his eyes without flinching. just as she had all those years ago. Her voice hardened. Come to watch the show. Watch the poor girl lose everything? I own this building, Min-jun said simply, watching her face closely. Divine's expression shifted through confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked dangerously like rage. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You what? Every brick. Every lock, he repeated, his own words from the past echoing in his ears. He pulled his phone from his pocket and made a call, never breaking eye contact with her. The eviction is cancelled. Effective immediately. Have her rent account credited for the next 12 months. And fire whoever processed this notice. He ended the call and slipped the phone away. Divine was staring at him like he had grown a second head. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded, her voice rising. I don't need your charity, Min-jun. I don't need you sweeping in here like some kind of... She stopped abruptly, recognition dawning fully now as she took in his expensive suit, the confidence that bordered on arrogance, the cold authority in his eyes. Her lips parted in shock. Oh my God. You're him. The Viper. Min-jun said nothing, which was confirmation enough. He watched emotions flicker across her face, fear, disbelief, and something else he couldn't quite name. She took a step back, bumping against the wall. I defended you, she said slowly, her voice hollow. I thought you were just some scared kid who needed help. And you became, what? A criminal? A gangster? I became someone who survives, Min-jun said, his tone flat. Someone who makes sure no one can ever hurt him again. Or the people he cares about. The last part slipped out before he could stop it. Divine caught it immediately, her eyes narrowing. You don't know me anymore. You don't care about me. But he did. God help him, seeing her here, seeing her brought this low by a system he now controlled, ignited something in him that had been dormant for over a decade. The debt he owed her could never be repaid in money or favors. She had given him his dignity when he had nothing else. Stay in your apartment, he said, his voice brooking no argument. The eviction is void. Your rent is covered. I said I don't need your charity, Divine cut him off, fire returning to her voice. She grabbed one of the trash bags and hoisted it over her shoulder. I'll find somewhere else. Min-jun moved before he could think, his hand closing around her wrist. The contact sent electricity racing up his arm. Her skin was soft, warm, alive. She froze, looking down at where he held her, then up at his face. You have nowhere to go, he said quietly. Don't let pride make you homeless. And don't let guilt make you a savior, she shot back. But she didn't pull away. They stood like that, connected by touch and history, while the storm raged outside and the building creaked around them. Min-jun released her carefully, stepping back to give her space. Fine. But you stay here tonight. It's your home. What you do after that is your choice. Divine's jaw worked as she fought some internal battle. Finally, she nodded once, sharp and reluctant. Fine. But I'm paying you back. Every cent. He almost smiled at that. Her pride was intact at least. Good. You know where to find me. He turned to leave, to put distance between himself and this complication before he did something stupid like offer her more than she would ever accept. But her voice stopped him at the stairs. Min-jun? Why did you come up here tonight? He looked back at her, this woman who had haunted his memories for years without knowing it, and chose honesty over evasion. I heard someone crying. I thought they might need help. And the Viper helps people now. The skepticism in her tone was knife-sharp. No, he admitted. But Min-jun Kim might. For the right person. He left before she could respond, descending the stairs with measured steps even though everything in him wanted to go back. His driver was waiting outside, engine running, and Min-jun slid into the back seat with his mind already working through the implications of tonight. Change of plans, he told his second-in-command over the phone. I want a full security detail on Divine Hayes. Discreet. No one touches her. And find out why her rent situation got this bad. There was a pause on the other end, then a carefully neutral response. Understood, boss. Min-jun ended the call and stared out at the rain-soaked streets. He had just involved himself in something that could become a liability, a weakness his enemies would exploit without mercy. But the image of Divine's tear-streaked face, the sound of her sobs, the proud defiance in her eyes, all of it was burned into his mind. He owed her a debt. And Min-jun Kim always paid his debts. What he didn't know, as his car pulled away from the curb, was that someone else had been watching the building tonight. Someone with their own reasons to be interested in the Viper's movements. And they had seen him enter. Seen him emerge with a look on his face that suggested vulnerability. In their world, vulnerability was blood in the water. The hunt had just begun. Divine woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through her window and the disorienting realization that she was still in her apartment. For a moment she thought the previous night had been a fever dream. Min-jun Kim, the boy she had defended, now the infamous Viper, appearing like a ghost from her past to save her from eviction. But her phone proved it was real. A text message from an unknown number read, "Your account has been credited. Rent paid through next year. The building manager has been replaced. You're safe." No signature, but she knew who had sent it. Divine sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the message until her eyes burned. She should feel grateful. Relieved. Instead, she felt trapped, like she had just accepted a deal with the devil without reading the fine print. She went through her morning routine on autopilot, showering away the tears from last night, dressing in jeans and a simple black top for her shift at the community center where she worked as a youth counselor. The job barely paid enough to survive, but it mattered. These kids needed someone who understood what it meant to fight for every scrap of dignity in a world determined to grind you down. Divine grabbed her bag and headed out, locking her door behind her. As she descended the stairs, she noticed the difference immediately. The hallway was cleaner. The flickering light had been replaced. There was even a new coat of paint on the walls. Min-jun worked fast. The thought sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. She pushed through the building's front door and onto the street, breathing in the morning air that still smelled of rain. Los Angeles was waking up around her, and for the first time in months she could walk without the crushing weight of impending homelessness on her shoulders. But freedom came with a price, and she had a feeling she would be paying it soon enough. Divine made it 2 blocks before she noticed the car. Black sedan, tinted windows, driving at exactly her pace half a block behind. At first she told herself it was paranoia. Then she turned down a side street and the car followed. Her heart rate kicked up. She ducked into a coffee shop, watching through the window as the sedan pulled to the curb and waited. Not paranoia. Reality. Divine ordered a coffee she didn't want and pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She still had the number from last night's text. She hesitated, pride warring with fear before typing, "Call off your dogs. I don't need a babysitter." The response came within seconds. "Not my dogs. Stay in public places. I'm sending someone." Before she could reply, a woman entered the coffee shop. Tall, Korean, dressed in understated but clearly expensive clothes, she moved with the fluid grace of someone trained in violence. She scanned the room, locked eyes with Divine, and approached without hesitation. "Miss Hayes," the woman said quietly. "I'm Hannah. Mr. Kim sent me. There's a car outside following you. It's not ours." Divine's blood went cold. "Then whose?" Hannah's expression was grim. "We're about to find out. But first I need to get you somewhere safe." "I have to go to work," Divine protested, even as fear wrapped around her throat. "I have kids depending on me." "The community center on 5th, Hannah said, surprising her. "Mr. Kim briefed us. We'll escort you there and establish a perimeter. But you need to understand something, Miss Hayes. You've been noticed. And in our world that's dangerous. Our world." Divine wanted to scream that it wasn't her world, that she had never asked to be pulled into whatever darkness Min-jun inhabited. But the black sedan outside and the cold certainty in Hannah's eyes told her it was already too late. "Let's go," she said instead, standing on unsteady legs. They left through the back exit, Hannah moving with precise efficiency. A different car waited, sleek and armored, with a driver who nodded respectfully as they climbed in. As they pulled away, Divine watched the black sedan attempt to follow before 2 motorcycles cut it off, forcing it down a different street. "Who's after me?" Divine asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Hannah glanced at her. "You really don't know what you've walked into, do you? Enlighten me." The Korean Mafia isn't a monolith. There are factions, rivalries, power struggles. Mr. Kim controls significant territory, which means he has enemies. Lots of them. The woman paused, choosing her words carefully. "Last night he was seen entering and leaving your building. Spending time with you. In our world, that makes you either an asset or a target." "I'm neither," Divine said firmly. "I'm just someone he used to know." Hannah's look was almost pitying. "That's not how his enemies will see it. To them you're leverage. A weakness they can exploit." The car pulled up to the community center and Divine climbed out on shaking legs. Hannah followed, scanning the street with professional wariness. "We'll be nearby," Hannah said. "If anything feels wrong, you call this number." She handed Divine a card with a single phone number embossed on it. "Don't hesitate." Divine pocketed the card and walked into the center, trying to project normalcy even as her world tilted on its axis. The kids arrived within the hour, a rowdy group of teenagers from the neighborhood who needed structure and someone to believe in them. She threw herself into the work, leading discussions about goal setting and self-worth, helping with homework, mediating disputes. But part of her mind was always on that black sedan. On Hannah's words. On the fact that Min-jun Kim had just dragged her into a war she didn't understand. The day passed in a blur. As Divine locked up that evening, exhaustion settled into her bones. She found Hannah waiting outside with the same armored car. "Any problems?" Hannah asked. "Not here," Divine said. "But I think it's time I had a conversation with your boss." Hannah nodded, pulling out her phone. She spoke in rapid Korean, then looked at Divine. "Tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. He'll meet you at the cafe on 7th. Come alone, but we'll be watching." Divine agreed, even though everything in her screamed that meeting Min-jun again was a mistake. But she needed answers. Needed to understand what he had pulled her into and how she could extract herself before it was too late. That night, Divine barely slept. She kept seeing shadows in every corner, hearing noises in the hallway. When her alarm finally went off, she felt hollowed out, running on adrenaline and stubbornness. The cafe on 7th was upscale, the kind of place Divine would never normally spend money. But Min-jun sat in a corner booth looking perfectly at home, his suit probably worth more than 3 months of her rent. He stood when she approached, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that felt absurd given what he had become. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. Divine slid into the booth across from him, refusing to be intimidated by his presence even though he radiated danger like heat from a flame. "You said we needed to talk. So talk." Min-jun studied her face and she saw something flicker in his dark eyes, concern, regret, something almost human beneath the cold exterior. "You're in danger because of me." "So I've been told," Divine said tightly. "What I want to know is why. And what you're going to do about it." He leaned back, his fingers laced together on the table. "I have enemies. People who would hurt you to hurt me. The fact that I showed interest in your situation, that I personally intervened, it makes you a target." Then unintervened, Divine shot back. "Take back your money, your protection, whatever strings you've attached to me. Let me disappear." "It's too late for that." Min-jun's voice was flat, certain. "They've already seen you. Already marked you. Even if I walk away now, they won't." Divine felt the cage closing around her. "So what, I'm just collateral damage in your gang war? A victim waiting to happen?" "No," Min-jun said, and the intensity in his voice made her breath catch. "You're someone I'm going to protect. Whether you like it or not. I don't need your protection. You needed it last night." His words landed like stones. "You were hours from being on the street, Divine. Don't pretend you had better options." The truth of it stung, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "So what's your plan? Keep me in a bubble? Have your people follow me everywhere?" "Yes," he said simply. "Until I can neutralize the threat." "How long will that take?" "As long as it takes." They stared at each other across the table, locked in a battle of wills. Divine saw the boy she had once defended in the hard lines of his face, but that boy was buried under layers of violence and power. This man was a stranger. A beautiful, terrifying stranger who had somehow appointed himself her guardian. "I want a normal life," she said quietly. "I want to help kids, pay my bills, maybe date someone who doesn't have a price on his head." "Is that too much to ask?" Something passed over Min-jun's face, pain, longing, regret. "Not in my world." "Then I don't want to be in your world." Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Min-jun glanced at it and his expression went absolutely still. When he looked up, Divine's blood ran cold at what she saw in his eyes. "We need to leave." "No." "What?" "Your apartment has been compromised. My people just reported a break-in." Divine's heart stopped. Her few possessions, her safe space, violated. She stood on shaking legs, letting Min-jun guide her out of the cafe and into a waiting car. Hannah was already there, her face grim. "They searched the place," Hannah reported. "Thoroughly. They know who she is now. Where she works. Everything." Divine felt the world spinning around her. This was real. The danger, the threat, all of it crashing down on her because of one act of kindness 12 years ago. Min-jun's hand found hers in the car, his fingers warm and solid. "I won't let them hurt you," he said quietly. "I swear it." And despite everything, the fear, the anger, the resentment, Divine found herself believing him. Found herself holding onto his hand like it was the only solid thing in a world gone mad. They drove through the city as rain began to fall again, and Divine watched the streets blur past, knowing that her life had just changed forever. There was no going back to normal. No escaping the shadows that now followed her every step. She was caught in Min-jun's world now, and she had a terrible feeling that the only way out was through. The safe house was nothing like Divine had expected. Instead of some dingy hideout, Min-jun brought her to a penthouse in one of downtown's most exclusive buildings. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles stretched out below like a glittering circuit board. The interior was all clean lines and expensive minimalism, more high-end hotel than home. "This is where you live?" Divine asked, setting down the single bag of belongings Hannah had salvaged from her apartment. "One of several places," Min-jun said, shrugging off his suit jacket. "The security here is top tier. No one gets in without clearance. You'll be safe." Safe. The word felt hollow. Divine walked to the windows, pressing her palm against the cool glass. From up here the city looked beautiful, peaceful even. But she knew better now. Knew that beneath the lights lurked a darkness she was only beginning to understand. "I don't belong here," she said quietly. Min-jun's reflection appeared in the glass behind her, his expression unreadable. "You belong wherever you choose to be." She turned to face him and the proximity stole her breath. He was close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, smell the subtle cologne that mixed with something uniquely him. Her body responded before her mind could intervene, awareness crackling between them like static electricity. Min-jun stepped back deliberately, putting distance between them. "Hannah will show you to your room. Anything you need, ask for it. My people will retrieve more of your things tomorrow." Just like that, he retreated behind his walls of control. Divine watched him walk away, feeling an irrational pang of disappointment. What was wrong with her? This man was a criminal, a killer probably. The fact that he made her pulse race was just biology, nothing more. Hannah appeared, professional and efficient, showing Divine to a guest suite that was bigger than her entire apartment. The bed was massive, dressed in white linens that probably cost more than her monthly salary. An en-suite bathroom featured a rainfall shower and a soaking tub. It was luxury beyond anything she had known. "Mr. Kim wants you to be comfortable," Hannah said. "But understand that you can't leave without an escort. For your own safety." Divine nodded, too tired to fight anymore. After Hannah left, she collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. How had her life become this in the span of 48 hours? 2 days ago, her biggest problem was making rent. Now she was living with a mafia boss who apparently felt responsible for her survival. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless, filled with fragments of dreams where danger lurked in every shadow. The days that followed fell into an uneasy routine. Min-jun was rarely there, handling business Divine didn't want to know about. When their paths did cross, the air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken words and forbidden attraction. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't decipher, hunger mixed with restraint, desire tempered by iron will. Divine tried to maintain some normalcy, working remotely with the community center, counseling kids over video calls. But the isolation was maddening. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage, and the man holding the key was slowly driving her insane with his presence and absence in equal measure. It was the end of her first week in the penthouse when everything shifted. Divine was in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner with ingredients that probably cost more than most people's grocery budgets, when the front door burst open. Min-jun stumbled in, supported by 2 of his men, blood soaking through his white shirt on the left side. Divine dropped the knife she was holding, fear slamming into her chest. "Oh my God. It's nothing," Min-jun ground out through clenched teeth. "Just a graze." "That is not nothing," Divine snapped, her nursing instincts, learned from volunteering at free clinics, kicking in. She rushed forward, helping his men guide him to the couch. "Someone get me a first aid kit." "No." One of the men disappeared and returned with a professional medical kit. Divine's hands shook as she carefully unbuttoned Min-jun's shirt, peeling the fabric away from the wound. It was a bullet graze along his ribs, deep enough to bleed freely but not life-threatening. "Yeah. This needs stitches," she said, meeting his eyes. "You need a hospital." "No hospitals," Min-jun said flatly. "Too many questions." "You can do it." "I'm not a doctor." "You volunteered at medical clinics." "I know because I know everything about you now, Divine." His admission should have felt invasive, but instead it sent heat racing through her. "Please. I trust you." Those words broke something open inside her. Divine nodded, focusing on the task at hand. She cleaned the wound with steady hands despite her inner turmoil, then threaded the needle. Min-jun didn't flinch as she began stitching, his eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her hands tremble. "What happened?" she asked, trying to distract herself from his gaze. "A raid. We hit one of our rivals' operations." Min-jun's voice was controlled despite the pain. "There was resistance. You could have been killed. But I wasn't." His hand came up, cupping her cheek with surprising gentleness. Because I have something to come back to now. Divine's breath caught. She finished the last stitch with shaking hands, then bandaged the wound carefully. When she finally looked up, Min-jun was still watching her with that same intense focus, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" "Because 12 years ago you saw me," Min-jun said quietly. "When everyone else looked through me like I was nothing, you saw me as a person worth defending. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How much that meant? I was just doing what was right." "No." His thumb stroked across her cheekbone, leaving fire in its wake. "You were being extraordinary. And I've never forgotten it. Never stopped thinking about the girl who stood up for me when she had nothing to gain and everything to lose." Divine felt tears prick her eyes. "That girl couldn't have imagined where you'd end up. Neither could the boy she defended," Min-jun said. "But here we are. And I'm not sorry you're in my life again, Divine. I know I should be. I know it puts you in danger. But I can't regret having you here." The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Divine knew she should pull away, should maintain distance. But his hand on her face felt like coming home, and the vulnerability in his eyes stripped away every defense she had built. "Min-jun," she breathed, and it was both warning and invitation. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to retreat. When their lips met, it was soft at first, tentative, a question asked and answered. Then Divine's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer despite his injury, and the kiss deepened into something that felt inevitable. His mouth moved against hers with controlled passion, tasting like danger and desire and something achingly sweet. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Min-jun rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he murmured. "You should stay far away from me." "Probably," Divine agreed. "But I'm not going anywhere." His lips curved into the first genuine smile she had seen from him, transforming his face into something heartbreakingly beautiful. "Good. Because I'm not letting you go." They stayed like that, tangled together on the couch, until Min-jun's men discreetly cleared out. Divine helped him to his bedroom, ignoring his protests that he was fine. She settled him into bed, checking his bandages one more time. "Stay," Min-jun said quietly, catching her hand. "Just for a while." Divine hesitated, knowing it was dangerous, knowing it blurred lines that should stay clear. But the exhaustion in his eyes, the vulnerability he was allowing her to see, it broke her resolve. She climbed onto the bed beside him, careful of his injury, and let him pull her close. "Tell me something real," she said into the darkness. "Something from before you became the Viper." Min-jun was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak, his voice low and rough. "My mother used to sing when she cleaned houses. Korean lullabies mixed with American songs she learned from the radio. She had the worst voice, completely tone-deaf, but she sang anyway because it made her happy. When she died when I was 19, I thought I'd never hear music again. Everything went silent." Divine's heart ached for the boy he had been, the loss he had suffered. "I'm sorry. Don't be. It made me who I am." His arms tightened around her. "But sometimes I wonder who I could have been if things had been different. If people like you had been in my life instead of the ones who taught me that power and fear were the only currencies that mattered. You could still be different," Divine said carefully. "It's not too late to change." "Yes, it is." Min-jun's voice was certain, sad. "I've gone too far, done too much. There's no redemption for men like me. I don't believe that." He kissed the top of her head, a gesture so tender it made her chest tight. "Then you're a better person than I deserve." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people from different worlds finding temporary peace in the eye of a storm. But outside, in the darkness of Los Angeles, forces were already moving. Someone had noticed Min-jun's distraction, his weakness. And they were preparing to exploit it. When Divine woke hours later, the bed beside her was empty. She found a note on the pillow in strong, slanted handwriting. "Had to handle something. Stay inside. Trust me." But trust was a luxury neither of them could afford. Because in Min-jun's office, a message had been delivered. A flash drive containing surveillance footage of Divine entering and leaving the penthouse. Of Min-jun watching her through the windows with naked longing on his face. And attached to it a simple note. "We know your weakness now. Let's negotiate." The message was from someone inside Min-jun's organization. A mole who had been waiting for exactly this kind of leverage. The game had just gotten deadlier. And Divine was the prize neither side could afford to lose. Min-jun stared at the flash drive like it was a live grenade. The footage was damning not because it showed anything illegal but because it showed emotion. In his world, emotion was exploitable. Love was a bullet waiting to be fired. Hannah stood across his desk, her expression carefully neutral. We're hunting the leak. But whoever it is, they're careful. No digital footprint. Keep looking, Min-jun said, his voice cold enough to frost the windows. And double Divine's security. No one gets within 100 feet of her. Sir, Hannah hesitated, a rarity for her. Is this wise? Getting attached to a civilian? It makes us vulnerable. I don't recall asking for your opinion on my personal life. Hannah bowed slightly, accepting the rebuke. Of course. But the rivals are circling. They smell blood. Min-jun dismissed her and turned to the windows, looking out over the city he controlled with an iron fist. Hannah was right. His obsession with Divine was a liability. The smart play would be to relocate her somewhere safe and distance himself completely. But he had never been particularly smart when it came to her. The problem was that his rivals weren't just circling, they were preparing to strike. And Min-jun needed to be proactive rather than reactive. Which meant bringing Divine deeper into his world, not pushing her away. He found her later in the penthouse's library, curled up with a book on urban youth development. She looked up as he entered, and the smile that crossed her face did dangerous things to his heart. Feeling better? She asked, gesturing to his bandaged ribs. Thanks to you. He sat beside her, close enough to catch her scent, cocoa butter and something uniquely divine. I have a proposition. She closed her book, eyebrows raised. I'm almost afraid to ask. I own several legitimate businesses. Restaurants, nightclubs, a few tech startups. Min-jun kept his voice casual. I need someone I trust to help manage the community outreach programs for these businesses. You have experience with youth programs, community building. It would give you something to do, a purpose beyond sitting in this penthouse. Divine studied him with those sharp eyes that seemed to see straight through his defenses. This is about more than keeping me busy. You're perceptive. Min-jun allowed himself a small smile. Yes. It's also about creating a public reason for us to be seen together. Making our connection legitimate in the eyes of both law enforcement and my rivals. If you're my employee, it's harder for them to use you against me. So I'm what, your shield? Divine's tone was sharp. A prop in your gang politics? No. Min-jun turned to face her fully. You're someone I trust to actually make a difference with resources I've never known how to properly use. And yes, it protects you. But it also gives you agency. Power. The ability to shape something positive from the money I've made through darker means. He watched her process this, saw the moment she shifted from defensive to intrigued. What kind of outreach programs? Whatever you think will help the communities we operate in. Youth centers, job training, scholarships. Min-jun leaned closer. I have money, Divine. More than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me use some of it for something that matters. The sincerity in his voice seemed to reach her. She bit her lip, thinking, and Min-jun found himself mesmerized by the gesture. Finally she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. But I have full creative control. And I want a real salary, not charity. Deal. They shook hands, the touch sending electricity racing up Min-jun's arm. When Divine didn't immediately let go, he made a decision that was either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. He pulled her close and kissed her, pouring everything he couldn't say into the press of his lips against hers. Divine melted into him with a soft sound that sent heat pooling in his gut. Her hands slid into his hair, nails scraping lightly against his scalp, and Min-jun forgot about strategy and danger and all the reasons this was a terrible idea. There was only Divine, soft and warm and perfect in his arms. When they broke apart, her eyes were dark with desire. That was, she started. Long overdue, Min-jun finished. She laughed, the sound light and genuine, and he felt something in his chest crack wider. How many years have we been dancing around this? 12 years, 3 weeks and 2 days, Min-jun said. But who's counting? Divine's smile faded into something more serious. Min-jun, what are we doing? This thing between us, it can't work. Your world is too dangerous. I know. He cradled her face between his hands. But I'm selfish enough not to care. I want you, Divine. Have wanted you since the moment you stepped between me and those boys, all fire and righteousness. If you tell me to walk away, I will. But don't ask me to stop wanting you. What if I don't want you to walk away? Then we figure this out. Together. They spent the rest of the evening planning the outreach programs, Divine's enthusiasm infectious as she sketched out ideas for community centers and mentorship programs. Min-jun watched her come alive, passionate and brilliant, and felt the last of his reservations crumble. She belonged here. With him. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings and stolen moments. Divine threw herself into the work, transforming Min-jun's vague ideas into concrete programs. She was a force of nature, negotiating with community leaders and nonprofit directors with the same fierce determination she had once used to defend him. And through it all, their connection deepened. Late nights working side by side turned into lingering touches. Casual conversations evolved into shared laughter and meaningful silences. Min-jun found himself opening up in ways he never had before, sharing pieces of himself he thought had died years ago. It was during one of these nights, working late in his home office, that Divine asked the question he had been dreading. How many people have you killed? Min-jun's hands stilled on the keyboard. He could have lied, deflected. Instead he chose truth. Directly? 7. Orders I've given that resulted in deaths? More than I care to count. Divine was quiet for a long moment. Does it haunt you? Every day. He turned to face her. I've done terrible things, Divine. Things that would make you sick if you knew the details. I can rationalize it, tell myself it was survival, business, the code of the world I live in. But the blood is still on my hands. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to know who I really am. Min-jun stood, crossing to where she sat. Not the boy you defended. Not the man who makes you laugh. The monster underneath it all. I don't see a monster, Divine said quietly. I see someone who's done monstrous things but who's trying, maybe for the first time, to be something better. Her words were absolution he didn't deserve. Min-jun pulled her to her feet and kissed her with desperate hunger, and she matched him heat for heat. They stumbled toward the couch, hands roaming, breath coming in gasps. When Min-jun's phone buzzed insistently, he almost ignored it. But in his world, ignoring calls could mean death. He checked the screen and went still. Bomb threat at the club on Sunset. 5 minutes ago. Divine saw his expression change. What is it? I have to go. He was already grabbing his jacket, his gun. Stay here. Don't leave this building. Min-jun. I mean it, Divine. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but Hannah. He left before she could argue, his heart pounding as he raced toward the club. His people had already evacuated the building, but the bomb squad hadn't arrived yet. Min-jun knew this wasn't about destroying property. It was a message. His rivals were escalating. The bomb was small, designed more for intimidation than mass casualties. It detonated in the empty club's basement, causing structural damage but no injuries. Min-jun stood outside, watching smoke pour from the windows, and felt cold rage settle into his bones. This was about Divine. About proving that he couldn't protect what mattered to him. He was proven right when he returned to the penthouse hours later. Divine was waiting, pacing anxiously, and threw herself into his arms the moment he walked through the door. I thought, she started, her voice breaking. When I heard the news, I thought maybe you. I'm fine. He held her tight, breathing in her scent. But we need to talk. Over the next hour, Min-jun laid out the full extent of the danger. The rivals who saw Divine as a weakness to exploit. The mole inside his organization feeding them information. The inevitable escalation toward open war. I want you to leave Los Angeles, he said finally. I'll set you up somewhere safe. New identity, new life. Away from all of this. Divine's eyes flashed. Absolutely not. This isn't negotiable. Yes, it is. She stood, hands on hips, defiant and magnificent. You don't get to pull me into your world, make me care about you, and then ship me off like some helpless damsel. I'm not leaving you, Min-jun. Not when you need me most. You don't understand what you're risking. Then make me understand. But don't ask me to run. I didn't run from those boys in high school and I'm not running now. Min-jun stared at her, torn between frustration and admiration. She was impossible. Stubborn. Perfect. Fine, he said. But you do exactly what I say when it comes to security. No arguments. Deal. Divine closed the distance between them. Now stop trying to push me away and kiss me instead. He did, and it felt like coming home. What neither of them knew was that in a warehouse across town, plans were being finalized. Plans that would force Min-jun to choose between his empire and the woman who had become his entire world. And hidden in his office, a file was about to be discovered that would change everything they thought they knew about the past that bound them together. The countdown to devastation had begun. The file arrived in a plain manila envelope, left on Min-jun's desk with no return address and no explanation. Hannah brought it to his attention during their morning security briefing, her expression troubled. This was hand-delivered to the front desk, she said. No cameras caught who left it. No one saw anything. Min-jun studied the envelope with growing unease. In his world, mysterious deliveries were rarely good news. He slid it open carefully, half expecting poison or a bomb trigger. Instead, he found documents. Old documents. Police reports, school records, and photographs that made his blood run cold. The photos showed a younger Divine, 17 and fierce, standing outside the high school they had both attended. But they also showed someone else, a man in a dark car watching her from across the street. The same man appeared in multiple photos spanning several months. Watching. Waiting. Min-jun shuffled through the police reports with mounting horror. A stalking complaint filed by Divine's mother, dismissed for lack of evidence. A restraining order application denied. And finally, an incident report from 12 years ago, dated 2 days after Divine had defended him in the parking lot. Subject found dead in apparent mugging. Victim identified as Robert Chin, age 34. Multiple stab wounds. Wallet missing. No suspects. But there was another photo in the file. This one showed a young Min-jun, 19 years old, walking away from an alley. His hands were in his pockets, his expression blank. The timestamp matched the night of Robert Chen's death. Min-jun's hands shook as he read the attached note, handwritten in Korean. You've been protecting her since the beginning. But does she know what you did? What you've always been. The implication was clear. Someone knew the truth about that night 12 years ago. The night Min-jun had discovered who was stalking Divine, had followed him, had made sure he would never hurt her. It had been Min-jun's first kill, motivated not by orders or survival but by pure protective rage. He had buried the truth so deep that even he had almost forgotten. But someone else remembered. Someone had collected evidence. And they were prepared to use it. Sir? Hannah's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts. What does it say? Min-jun closed the file with deliberate calm. Find out who delivered this. Check every camera within a 5-block radius. I want names. After Hannah left, Min-jun sat in silence, staring at the closed file. He had killed to protect Divine once before, though she had never known it. Would she understand if she learned the truth? Or would she see him as the monster he had warned her he was? He was still wrestling with the question when Divine burst into his office hours later, her face flushed with excitement. She held up a tablet showing blueprints and budget projections. The community center is approved, she announced. We break ground next month. This is going to change lives, Min-jun. Real lives. Her joy was infectious, and for a moment Min-jun let himself bask in it. Let himself imagine a world where he could be the man she deserved rather than the criminal he was. But the file on his desk was a reminder that the past never stayed buried. That's incredible, he said, standing to wrap his arms around her. You're incredible. Divine tilted her head back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. What's wrong? Something's bothering you. Just business complications. He forced a smile. Nothing for you to worry about. She didn't look convinced, but before she could press the issue, his phone rang. It was one of his lieutenants, voice tight with urgency. We have a situation. The rivals want a meeting. Tonight. They say they have information you'll want to hear. Min-jun's jaw clenched. Where? The old factory on the east side. Neutral ground. They're guaranteeing safe passage. It's a trap, Min-jun said flatly. Probably. But they said if you don't come, they'll start releasing information that will destroy you. The file. They had copies. Of course they did. I'll be there, Min-jun said, ending the call. He looked at Divine, memorizing her face in case this was the last time he saw it. I need to go out tonight. Hannah will stay with you. What kind of meeting? Divine's intuition was as sharp as ever. The kind that keeps you safe, he said, which wasn't really an answer. But Divine wasn't having it. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. Don't shut me out. Whatever's happening, we face it together. Remember? Min-jun cupped her face, memorizing the feel of her skin against his palms. You asked me once why I care so much about what happens to you. The truth is that you're the only good thing in my life, Divine. The only thing that makes me think I might be worth saving. But there are things I've done, things you don't know about. Then tell me. So he did. He pulled out the file and laid it on the desk between them, watched her face as she read through the documents, saw the moment she understood what they meant. This man was stalking me, Divine said slowly, pointing to Robert Chen's photo. I remember him. My mom and I were terrified. The police wouldn't help. And then suddenly he just stopped. He stopped because I made him stop. Min-jun's voice was steady despite the fear coursing through him. I found out who he was. Followed him. And I killed him in that alley. It was the first time I took a life, Divine. And I did it for you. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Min-jun waited for horror, for condemnation, for her to walk away from the monster he had revealed himself to be. Instead, Divine asked quietly, did he suffer? The question caught him off guard. Yes, I made sure of it. Good. Her voice was cold, certain. He terrorized us for months. Made my mother afraid to leave the house. Made me look over my shoulder every second. If you killed him, then you saved us. Min-jun stared at her, unable to believe what he was hearing. You're not horrified? I'm horrified that someone was stalking me. That a man wanted to hurt me and the system failed to protect us. Divine moved around the desk, taking his hands in hers. But I'm not horrified that you stopped him. You did what needed to be done. It was murder, Divine. It was justice. She held his gaze. And if that makes me a bad person for condoning it, then I guess we're both monsters. Something broke open in Min-jun's chest, a flood of emotion he had been holding back for years. He pulled her to him and kissed her with desperate hunger, and she met him with equal intensity. They stumbled toward the desk, papers scattering as he lifted her onto it. They made love with an urgency born of fear and revelation, two people clinging to each other against the darkness pressing in from all sides. When it was over, Divine lay in his arms, her head on his chest, their breathing slowly returning to normal. I love you, Min-jun said into her hair. I need you to know that. Whatever happens tonight, I love you. Divine lifted her head, her eyes shining with tears. Then come back to me. Whatever they want, whatever they're threatening, we'll deal with it together. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I will. I promise. But promises were easy to make and hard to keep, especially in his world. That night, Min-jun drove to the abandoned factory with 4 of his best men. The building loomed against the night sky, windows shattered and walls tagged with graffiti. It reeked of desperation and decay, the perfect setting for a betrayal. They were waiting inside, a delegation from the rival Korean syndicate, led by a man Min-jun recognized from intelligence reports. Park Sung-ho, ambitious and ruthless, the kind of man who would burn the city to gain power. Viper, Park greeted him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thank you for coming. You have information I supposedly want to hear, Min-jun said coldly. So talk. Park gestured to a laptop set up on a rusted table. We have comprehensive files on your operations. Your legitimate businesses, your laundering schemes, your protection rackets. And of course, evidence of murder. Several murders, in fact. The screen showed document after document, photo after photo. Years of carefully hidden crimes laid bare. What do you want? Min-jun asked, though he already knew. Your territory. Your legitimate fronts. And you step down from leadership. Park's smile widened. In exchange, none of this goes to the authorities. Or to that pretty civilian you've been keeping around. Min-jun's blood went cold. You touch her. We won't have to touch her, Park interrupted. We'll just make sure she knows exactly who you are. What you are. Every life you've taken. Every crime you've committed. Do you really think she'll stay with you when she knows the full truth? She already knows enough. Does she know about the politician you executed 3 years ago? The witnesses you've silenced? The children left orphaned by your orders? Park leaned forward. I don't think she knows the real monster you are, Viper. Min-jun said nothing, his mind racing through scenarios. He could kill everyone in this room. Should kill them. But Park had been smart. The files were already distributed, insurance policies that would trigger if anything happened to him. I need time to consider, Min-jun said finally. You have 24 hours. Park stood. After that, we start releasing information. Starting with Divine Hayes. Let's see how she feels about you when she knows you're the reason her father is dead. The world tilted. What? Park's smile was venomous. You didn't know? 8 years ago, Marcus Hayes was killed in crossfire during one of your raids on the docks. Your bullets, your operation, her father's blood. Surprise, Viper. The woman you love has every reason to hate you. Min-jun left the factory in a daze, his men silent around him. The revelation had shattered something inside him. Divine's father. He had killed Divine's father. Or as good as. When he returned to the penthouse, Divine was waiting, dressed in one of his shirts, her legs bare and her expression worried. Thank God, she said, rushing to him. I was so scared. Did you know your father died 8 years ago? Min-jun's voice was harsh, broken. Did you know he was killed in a gang shooting at the docks? Divine froze. Yes, I know. It destroyed my mother. Destroyed me. Why are you asking? Because it was my operation, Divine. My raid. My bullets that filled the air that night. Min-jun saw the moment understanding dawned, saw the color drain from her face. I killed your father. The silence that followed was deafening. Divine's hands fell to her sides, her eyes wide with shock and pain. She took a step back, then another, until she hit the wall. No, she whispered. No, you couldn't have. You wouldn't have. I didn't know, Min-jun said desperately. Didn't know he was there, didn't know who he was. But it doesn't change the fact that he's dead because of me. Divine slid down the wall, her knees giving out. Min-jun moved toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "Just don't." He stood helplessly as she cried, every sob a knife in his heart. This was it. The moment he lost her. The moment he had always known was coming but had desperately hoped to avoid. Finally, Divine looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Get out, Divine. I said get out." Her scream echoed through the penthouse. "I can't look at you right now. I can't. I just can't." Min-jun left, his world crumbling around him. He went to his office and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. Everything he had built, everything he had become, all of it meaningless in the face of Divine's pain. Hours passed. His phone buzzed repeatedly, his lieutenants demanding orders, Hannah requesting guidance, Park sending threatening messages. Min-jun ignored them all. It wasn't until dawn that his phone rang with a call he couldn't ignore. Hannah's voice was sharp with panic. "Sir, Divine is gone. She left the penthouse. We're tracking her now, but..." The line went dead. Min-jun's blood turned to ice. He tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. When he tried Divine's phone, he got the same result. A text message appeared, this time with a video attachment. The preview image showed Divine, bound and gagged, fear stark in her eyes. The message was simple: "Come alone or she dies." Address attached. "You have 1 hour." Min-jun stared at the screen, and something in him crystallized into cold, lethal purpose. They thought they could use Divine against him. Thought they could take away the only thing that mattered. They had just made the worst mistake of their lives. He loaded his weapons, called in every favor he was owed, and prepared for war. Whatever it took, whoever had to die, he would get Divine back. Even if it meant burning the entire city down. Min-jun drove through the pre-dawn streets with ice in his veins and murder in his heart. The address Park had sent led to a warehouse district near the port, isolated enough that screams would go unheard. Classic ambush territory. They expected him to come in reckless, blinded by emotion. They were half right. He was coming. But he was far from blind. 3 blocks from the target, Min-jun pulled over and made a series of calls. Within minutes, his most trusted fighters were mobilizing from locations across the city. Hannah was coordinating a perimeter despite the communication blackout that had taken her offline earlier. His tech specialist was hacking into every camera system in the area. But Min-jun wasn't waiting for backup. Every second Divine spent in their hands was a second too long. He approached the warehouse on foot, moving through shadows with the grace of the predator his name implied. 2 guards stood at the entrance, smoking and talking in low voices. Min-jun eliminated them silently, efficiently, with the blade he carried in his boot. They died before they could alert anyone inside. The warehouse interior was a maze of shipping containers and rusted machinery. Min-jun moved through it like smoke, taking out guards one by one. Some died silently. Others he left alive, wounded and terrified, knowing their fear would spread through the building like a contagion. He found Divine in a room on the 2nd floor, tied to a chair with zip ties, a gag in her mouth. Relief crashed through him when their eyes met, when he saw she was alive. But the fear and hurt in her gaze cut deeper than any blade. 2 guards stood watch over her. Min-jun shot them both before they could react, center mass, efficient. The suppressor on his gun kept the shots quiet, but Divine flinched at the violence. He rushed to her, cutting away the restraints with his knife. Divine pulled the gag from her mouth, gasping for air. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where she had struggled against the zip ties. "Are you hurt?" Min-jun demanded, his hands running over her frantically, checking for injuries. "I'm fine," Divine said, her voice hoarse. "It's a trap, Min-jun. They knew you'd come. They're waiting." The door exploded inward. Armed men flooded the room, at least a dozen, weapons trained on them from every angle. Park Sung-ho entered last, his expression triumphant. "The mighty Viper, brought low by a woman," Park said, shaking his head mockingly. "I almost feel sorry for you. Almost." "Let her go," Min-jun said, positioning himself between Divine and the guns. "This is between us." "Oh, I don't think so." Park gestured, and 2 men grabbed Divine, dragging her away despite her struggles. "You see, she's the leverage we need to make sure you cooperate. You're going to sign over everything, your territory, your businesses, your entire empire. And then you're going to disappear. And if I refuse?" Park pulled out a gun and pressed it to Divine's temple. "Then I paint the walls with her brain. Simple economics, Viper. What's worth more to you? Power or her life?" Min-jun met Divine's eyes. She was terrified but defiant, and even now, even after everything, she looked at him without condemnation. Just pleading. Pleading for him to save himself, to not sacrifice everything for her. But she didn't understand. She was everything. The empire, the power, the blood-soaked empire he had built, all of it was worthless compared to her. "I'll sign," Min-jun said quietly. Victory flashed across Park's face. "Smart choice." He gestured to a laptop one of his men produced. "The documents are already prepared. Your digital signature and it's done." Min-jun approached the computer, his mind racing. He could see Divine in his peripheral vision, see the tears streaming down her face. He touched the screen, beginning the signature process. And then all hell broke loose. The windows shattered as Min-jun's team rappelled through them, automatic weapons blazing. The carefully orchestrated chaos he had planned with Hannah kicked into gear. Flashbangs, smoke grenades, precision shots from snipers positioned on nearby buildings. Min-jun dove for Divine, tackling her and the men holding her to the ground. He came up fighting, his fists and elbows breaking bones with brutal efficiency. One guard went down with a shattered jaw. Another with crushed ribs. Park screamed orders, but his men were panicking, caught in a kill zone they hadn't anticipated. Min-jun's fighters were better trained, better armed, and fighting with the focused fury of men protecting their king. Min-jun grabbed Divine's hand and pulled her toward the exit, laying down covering fire with his pistol. Bodies fell around them, the warehouse filling with smoke and gunfire and screams. They were almost to the door when Park appeared, his face twisted with rage, his gun aimed directly at Divine. Time slowed. Min-jun saw Park's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the barrel flash. He moved without thinking, pulling Divine behind him, his body taking the bullet meant for her. The impact spun him around, pain exploding through his shoulder. But adrenaline kept him upright, kept him moving. He returned fire, his shots catching Park in the chest, center mass, professional and lethal. Park's eyes widened in shock before he collapsed. Min-jun. Divine's scream seemed to come from very far away. He was on the ground, he realized dimly. When had that happened? She was over him, her hands pressing against his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. Hannah appeared, barking orders. Her face was grim as she assessed the wound. "We need to move." "No." They carried him out of the warehouse, past bodies and smoke and the ruins of Park's ambush. Min-jun drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragments, Divine's voice pleading with him to stay awake, the screech of tires, Hannah on the phone demanding a doctor. He woke in a bedroom he didn't recognize, daylight streaming through unfamiliar windows. The pain in his shoulder was intense, focused, the kind that meant serious damage. Divine sat beside the bed, her hand clutching his, her face drawn with exhaustion. He croaked. Divine's head snapped up, relief flooding her features. "Oh, thank God. You're awake. Where are we?" "Safe house." "Different one." "Hannah's been coordinating security." Divine's voice broke. "You were shot, Min-jun. The bullet went through your shoulder, barely missed your subclavian artery. The doctor said if it had been an inch to the right. But it wasn't." He tried to sit up, gasping at the pain. "Is Park dead?" "Yes." Divine helped him ease back against the pillows. "It's over. His entire operation collapsed after you killed him. Your people are securing the territory now." "Good." Min-jun studied her face, seeing the exhaustion and trauma etched there. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For your father, for dragging you into this nightmare." Divine pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "We'll talk about my father. We'll deal with all of it. But right now, I need you to understand something." Her eyes were fierce, determined. "When I saw him point that gun at you, when I thought you were going to die, nothing else mattered. Not the past, not my anger, not any of it. I love you, Min-jun. And I need you to stop trying to push me away to protect me. We're in this together. Even after everything you know about me? Especially after everything I know about you." Divine leaned down, kissing him gently. "You're a killer and a criminal and you've done terrible things. But you're also the man who's been protecting me since I was 17. The man who took a bullet for me. The man who looked at his entire empire and decided I was worth more." Min-jun felt tears prick his eyes, a rare show of emotion he couldn't control. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." Divine smiled, watery and beautiful. "But you're stuck with me anyway." They sat in silence for a while, hands intertwined, both processing the trauma of the past hours. Finally, Min-jun spoke again. "There's something else you need to know. Something Park told me." "What?" "He said your father's death was my fault. That he died in one of my raids." He watched her face carefully. "Is it true?" Divine was quiet for a long moment. "Yes. I figured it out after I read the file. The dates matched the location. I was so angry when I realized. Felt so betrayed." Min-jun's heart cracked. "Divine. But then I remembered something my father told me once, she continued. He was working on the docks that night as a security guard. He knew there was illegal activity, knew it was dangerous. But he took the job anyway because we needed the money. Her voice was steady despite the tears on her cheeks. You didn't kill him, Min-jun. Poverty killed him. A system that forced him to work in dangerous places to keep his family fed. You were just collateral in a much bigger tragedy. I'm still responsible. Maybe. Divine wiped her eyes. But I've had to ask myself what good it does to blame you. To hate you for being part of a system that destroyed my family. And the answer is none. It does no good at all. So I'm choosing to focus on who you are now, what we can build together, rather than tearing apart what's already broken. Her forgiveness was more than he deserved, more than he had ever hoped for. Min-jun pulled her down to him, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, and held her like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. You already are, Divine whispered back. They stayed like that until Hannah knocked quietly and entered. She looked between them, her expression softening in a rare show of emotion. Sorry to interrupt. But there's something you need to know. Min-jun straightened, instantly alert despite his injury. What is it? We've been interrogating the survivors from Park's crew. Hannah's face was grim. Park wasn't working alone. He had a partner. Someone who's been feeding him information about your operations, your weaknesses. Someone inside your inner circle. Do we have a name? Not yet. But we have a lead. Hannah hesitated. The files Park had, the evidence he threatened you with, they came from someone who had access to your most secure systems. Someone you trust implicitly. Min-jun's blood ran cold. His inner circle was small by design. Hannah, 3 lieutenants, his tech specialist. The idea that one of them had betrayed him was almost incomprehensible. But there was one more name in that circle. One that made bile rise in his throat. Set up a meeting with everyone on that list, he ordered. Tell them it's mandatory. And Hannah? Come armed. After she left, Divine looked at him with concern. You think you know who it is? I think I do. Min-jun's voice was flat, emotionless. And if I'm right, it's going to destroy everything. Then we'll rebuild, Divine said firmly. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Min-jun kissed her, drawing strength from her certainty. Together. But even as he said it, dread settled in his bones. Because the person he suspected wasn't just a traitor. It was someone who had helped him build his empire from nothing. Someone he had thought of as family. And when the truth came out, Min-jun knew the betrayal would cut deeper than any bullet. The meeting was set for that evening. And with it, the revelation that would change everything. Because the mole wasn't just an enemy. The mole was family. Min-jun's half-brother, the one person he had thought he could trust absolutely, had been planning his downfall for years. And the final battle was only just beginning. The revelation came in Min-jun's secure conference room, with all his trusted lieutenants assembled around the table. Hannah had worked through the night, following digital breadcrumbs through encrypted servers and offshore accounts. What she found was a trail leading directly to one person, Lee Tae-young, Min-jun's half-brother. Tae-young sat across the table with his characteristic easy smile, unaware that his world was about to implode. He was handsome in a way Min-jun had never been, with their father's softer features instead of their mother's sharp angles. While Min-jun had clawed his way up from nothing, Tae-young had been raised by their father, the same father who had abandoned Min-jun and his mother when he was 3. Show him, Min-jun said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion. Hannah opened her laptop, turning it so everyone could see. Financial records appeared on the screen, payments from Tae-young's accounts to Park Sung-ho, to corrupt police officers to other rival factions. Emails discussing Min-jun's vulnerabilities. Surveillance footage showing Tae-young meeting with Park in shadowy locations. The proof was damning and irrefutable. Tae-young's smile faded. He looked at the screen, then at Min-jun, and something shifted in his expression. The mask of affability cracked, revealing cold hatred beneath. How long have you known? Tae-young asked conversationally. About an hour, Min-jun admitted. But I've suspected for longer. Small things that didn't add up. Leaks that came at convenient times. Your sudden interest in Divine. Divine. Tae-young's lip curled. The precious civilian who's made you weak. Made you sloppy. Do you know how pathetic you've become, brother? The great viper, brought down by his feelings for a woman. What? Min-jun kept his voice level despite the rage building in his chest. Why betray me? I brought you into this organization. Gave you power, wealth, respect. Because you never deserved it. Tae-young stood, his chair scraping back. You're nothing but the bastard son of a whore our father discarded. You crawled up from the gutter and somehow convinced everyone you were worthy of leading us. But I'm his legitimate son. His heir. This empire should be mine. The room went deathly silent. Min-jun's lieutenants shifted uncomfortably, hands moving toward weapons. But Min-jun held up a hand, stopping them. Our father was a weak man who abandoned his responsibilities, Min-jun said coldly. I built this empire from nothing. You were handed everything and still managed to be mediocre. Tae-young's face twisted with rage. He pulled a gun but he wasn't fast enough. Hannah had her weapon out and aimed at his head before he could fully draw. I wouldn't, she said calmly. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Tae-young laughed bitterly. You think this is over? I have contingencies. Plans within plans. Kill me and everything I know goes to the authorities. Your operations, your money laundering, your murders. All of it. Then it seems we're at an impasse, Min-jun said. Put the gun down, Tae-young. Let's talk like civilized people. What would have happened next remained uncertain, because at that moment Tae-young's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression morphed into triumph. Too late, brother. My people just executed the backup plan. Min-jun's own phone rang. It was Divine, her voice tight with fear. Min-jun, there are men outside the safe house. They're trying to get in. Hannah's security team is holding them off, but... Gunfire erupted in the background and the line went dead. Min-jun moved without thinking, his gun coming up, the shot taking Tae-young in the leg before anyone could react. His half-brother went down screaming, the weapon clattering from his hand. Keep him alive, Min-jun barked at his lieutenants. We'll deal with him later. To Hannah, get everyone to the safe house. Now. They moved as a unit, piling into armored vehicles that screamed through the streets. Min-jun called Divine repeatedly, but the line remained dead. Each unanswered ring felt like a knife twisting in his gut. The safe house was a war zone when they arrived. Bodies littered the front yard, both his security team and the attackers. Bullets had shattered windows, pocked the walls. Smoke hung in the air from a grenade explosion. Min-jun charged inside, Hannah and his men at his back. They cleared rooms with brutal efficiency, putting down anyone who wasn't one of theirs. Min-jun's heart pounded as he raced up the stairs to the master bedroom where he had left Divine. She wasn't there. He found her in the panic room, pressed against the far wall with a gun in her shaking hands. Two bodies lay at her feet, attackers who had nearly breached the reinforced door. Relief and pride crashed through him simultaneously. I'm okay, Divine said, lowering the weapon. Her voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. They tried to break in. I remembered what you taught me. Min-jun pulled her into his arms, checking her frantically for injuries. When he was satisfied she was unharmed, he kissed her hard enough to bruise. You're incredible. You know that? I'm terrified, Divine corrected. But I'm also really angry. She pulled back, her eyes flashing. Your brother did this. He tried to kill me to hurt you. I know. Min-jun's voice was ice. But he failed. And now he's going to pay. Over the next days, the full scope of Tae-young's betrayal became clear. He hadn't just been working with Park. He had been orchestrating a coalition of rival factions, all united in their desire to bring Min-jun down. The network was extensive, reaching into law enforcement, politics, legitimate business. Dismantling it would require more than brute force. It would require strategy, alliances, and Divine's unexpected brilliance. She proved to be an invaluable asset. Her work in the community had given her connections Min-jun had never cultivated. Relationships with neighborhood leaders, nonprofit directors, people who knew where bodies were buried and secrets were kept. She leveraged those relationships ruthlessly, building a network of intelligence that rivaled anything his organization had. We need to think bigger than just taking out Tae-young, Divine argued during one of their war councils. We need to dismantle the systems that allowed him to build this coalition. Cut off his money, his political protection, his ability to operate. She outlined a plan that was audacious in its scope, using Min-jun's legitimate businesses as wedges to push out the corrupt politicians and officials protecting his enemies. Community pressure campaigns to expose dirty cops. Financial maneuvers to drain offshore accounts. It was brilliant. It was also dangerous, putting Divine directly in the line of fire. I don't like this, Min-jun said flatly. You're making yourself a target. I'm already a target, Divine countered. Might as well make it count for something. They worked together for weeks, Divine's strategic mind complementing Min-jun's tactical expertise. Slowly, methodically, they dismantled Tae-young's network. Rivals turned on each other as money dried up. Politicians jumped ship when their corruption was exposed. The coalition crumbled. Through it all, Min-jun and Divine's relationship deepened into something unshakable. They had seen each other at their worst, their most vulnerable, and had chosen each other anyway. Late nights planning strategy turned into stolen moments of tenderness. The violence of their days gave way to quiet evenings where they could just be Min-jun and Divine, not the Viper and his protected civilian. One night, lying tangled together after making love, Divine traced the serpent tattoo that coiled up Min-jun's arm. "Tell me about this." "It was my initiation mark," he said quietly. "When I joined the organization. The serpent represents wisdom, protection, and deadly grace. Everything I wanted to become." "And have you become it?" Min-jun considered. "I don't know. Maybe the serpent has just shed its skin. Become something new." Divine smiled, pressing a kiss to his chest. "I like new Min-jun. He's less scary. I'm still terrifying. Only when you want to be." He pulled her closer, breathing in her scent. "I never thought I could have this. Well, a future that doesn't end in blood." "We don't have it yet," Divine reminded him. "Your brother is still out there. Still dangerous." Tae-young had escaped custody during a prisoner transfer, killing 3 of Min-jun's men in the process. He had gone underground, but intelligence suggested he was gathering resources for one final assault. "We'll stop him," Min-jun said with certainty. "Whatever it takes." But Divine was quiet, her hand resting on her stomach in a gesture that gave him pause. "There's something I need to tell you. Something that changes everything." She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, her expression nervous. "I'm pregnant, Min-jun. About 6 weeks along." The world tilted. Min-jun stared at her, trying to process the words. "Baby. Their baby." "Say something," Divine whispered. "I'm going to be a father," he said slowly, wonder creeping into his voice. "We're going to have a child. Are you happy? Scared? Angry? All of it." Min-jun pulled her back into his arms, his hand joining hers on her stomach. "But mostly happy. Terrified but happy." Divine laughed, the sound watery with tears. "We can't raise a baby in this world, Min-jun. We can't have our child growing up surrounded by violence and danger." "I know." The certainty in his voice surprised him. "Which means we end this. Completely. I'll dismantle the organization, go legitimate, whatever it takes. Our child deserves better than what I had. It won't be easy. Your enemies will be dealt with," Min-jun said firmly. "Starting with Tae-young. And then I walk away from all of it." They spent the rest of the night planning a future that seemed impossible but necessary. A future where Min-jun could be just a man, not a monster. Where Divine could raise their child without fear. Where love was enough. But first they had to survive the storm that was coming. Because Tae-young wasn't finished. Intelligence reports suggested he was planning something catastrophic. A final strike designed to destroy everything Min-jun had built. The battle lines were drawn. The stakes had never been higher. And in Divine's womb, a new life grew, a life that made losing unthinkable. The war was about to reach its bloody conclusion. The intel came from an unexpected source, one of Tae-young's own lieutenants, a man who had watched too many innocents die in the crossfire and decided he wanted out. The information was specific. Tae-young had acquired military-grade explosives and was planning to bomb 3 of Min-jun's legitimate businesses simultaneously, hoping to draw him out into the open for an assassination. The targets made Min-jun's blood run cold. One was the new community center Divine had worked so hard to establish, scheduled to open in 2 days with a ceremony attended by local families and children. Tae-young wasn't just trying to kill him anymore. He was trying to destroy everything that mattered. "We evacuate the center," Divine said immediately when Min-jun told her. "Cancel the opening, move everyone to safety." "That's what he expects," Min-jun said grimly. "He wants us scared, hiding, defensive. It makes us predictable. So what do you suggest?" Divine's hand unconsciously moved to her stomach, a protective gesture that tore at his heart. "We go on the offensive." Min-jun spread a map across the table, marking locations. "We've identified Tae-young's stronghold, a warehouse complex in the port district. He's turned it into a fortress, but nothing is impenetrable. We hit him first, hard enough that he can't execute his plan." Hannah leaned over the map, her expression calculating. "You're talking about a full assault. Military-style operation. We'd need significant firepower and coordination. Then we get it." Min-jun looked at his assembled lieutenants. "Every favor I'm owed, every alliance I've built, we call them in. Tonight we end this." The preparation took 6 hours. Min-jun reached out to other organizations he had maintained tenuous peace with, offering territorial concessions in exchange for support. He contacted weapons dealers, ex-military contractors, anyone who could provide the firepower needed to breach Tae-young's defenses. Divine worked alongside them, coordinating the logistics with a precision that would have impressed any military strategist. She had transformed from the woman he'd found crying in that hallway into someone formidable, someone who could hold her own in his dark world without losing her essential goodness. "You should stay here," Min-jun told her as the assault team assembled. "Stay safe. You're pregnant, Divine." "Which is exactly why I need to see this through," she countered. "This is about our future, Min-jun. Our child's future. I'm not sitting on the sidelines while you risk your life. Divine." "No." Her voice was firm. "I'm not asking to go into combat. But I'll be in the command vehicle, coordinating communications. You need me and we both know it." He wanted to argue to lock her away somewhere safe. But she was right. Her strategic mind, her ability to see patterns and connections, they needed it. "Fine," he relented. "But you stay in the armored vehicle. The moment things go wrong, you retreat. Promise me." "I promise." They moved out as night fell, a convoy of vehicles carrying 40 of Min-jun's best fighters plus reinforcements from allied organizations. The port district was dark, the warehouse complex rising against the night sky like a fortress from a nightmare. Min-jun reviewed the plan one last time over the comms. Team Alpha takes the east entrance. Bravo takes west. Snipers provide overwatch from the buildings across the street. Charlie team, that's me, goes through the roof. Our objective is to locate and neutralize Tae-young before he can trigger any failsafes. Divine's voice came through his earpiece, calm and steady. "All teams in position. Snipers have visual on patrol patterns. You've got a 3-minute window when the guards rotate shifts." Min-jun checked his weapons. 2 pistols, extra magazines, a combat knife, and the compact submachine gun slung across his back. "Let's move." The assault began with surgical precision. Snipers took out the perimeter guards silently. Team Alpha breached the east entrance with shaped charges, the explosion muffled by suppressed gunfire. Bravo went through the west wall using a vehicle as a battering ram. Min-jun's team rappelled from a helicopter onto the roof, cutting through the ventilation system to gain entry. They dropped into darkness, night vision goggles painting the world in shades of green. The warehouse interior was a maze of shipping containers stacked 3 high, creating corridors and dead ends. "Contact," someone called over the radio, followed by sustained gunfire. The element of surprise was gone. Tae-young's men poured out of concealed positions, and the warehouse became a war zone. Min-jun moved through it with deadly efficiency, years of combat experience guiding every action. He dropped targets with precise shots, his team flowing around him like a well-oiled machine. "Second floor is clear," Hannah reported. "Moving to third." "We've got wounded," another voice called. "Team Bravo is pinned down in the west corridor." Min-jun made rapid calculations. "Divine, reroute Charlie 2 to support Bravo. Alpha, converge on the central structure. That's where Tae-young will be." "Copy that," Divine responded, her voice tense but controlled. Min-jun fought his way toward the center of the warehouse, where intelligence suggested Tae-young had set up his command center. Bodies fell around him, some his, more theirs. The cost of this assault was mounting, but there was no turning back. He kicked open a reinforced door to find a room lined with monitors showing security feeds, weapons racks, and stacks of explosives. And there, in the center of it all, stood Tae-young. His half-brother looked different, harder, wilder, with the desperate edge of a man with nothing left to lose. He held a detonator in one hand, his other hand pressed against a wound in his side that stained his shirt crimson. "Brother," Tae-young said, his voice carrying a mocking edge. "Right on time. Come to finish what you started?" "It doesn't have to end this way," Min-jun said, his weapon trained on Tae-young's chest. "Put down the detonator. Surrender. You'll face justice, but you'll live." "Justice?" Tae-young laughed bitterly. "There's no justice in our world. Only power and the will to use it. You taught me that. I taught you wrong. No. You taught me exactly right. And now I'm going to use that lesson to bring your whole world down." Tae-young's thumb hovered over the detonator's trigger. "The explosives wired throughout this building, the ones planted at your precious community center, the bombs under your safe houses, all of it detonates if I press this button. Everyone you love, everything you've built, gone in an instant." Min-jun's heart stopped. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Tae-young's smile was unhinged. "Test me, brother. Take the shot. See what happens." A tense standoff stretched between them, brothers separated by blood and betrayal. Min-jun's finger rested on the trigger, but he couldn't pull it. Not when Divine was somewhere in that compound. Not when their child's future hung in the balance. Divine's voice crackled in his ear, barely audible. "Min-jun Bomb Squad is reporting in. They've located and disarmed devices at the community center and 2 of 3 safe houses. Working on the last one now." Hope flared in Min-jun's chest. You've lost, Tae-young. Your bombs are being disarmed as we speak. Your men are dead or surrendering. It's over. Tae-young's expression crumbled, rage and despair warring across his features. Then I'll take you with me. He moved to press the button, but Min-jun was faster. The shot took Tae-young in the wrist, sending the detonator flying. It skittered across the floor and both men dove for it. They collided in a tangle of limbs, Min-jun's gun knocked away. What followed was brutal, primal. Two brothers who had never known how to love each other, communicating in violence. Tae-young fought with desperate strength, his fists landing blows that Min-jun felt through his bones. But Min-jun had more to fight for. Divine's face flashed through his mind, the child growing inside her, the future they were building together. He channeled that into every punch, every block, every movement. They crashed through a stack of equipment, debris raining down. Tae-young grabbed a piece of rebar, swinging it at Min-jun's head. Min-jun ducked, the metal whistling past his ear, and drove his shoulder into Tae-young's midsection. They went down in a heap. Min-jun ended up on top, his hands closing around Tae-young's throat. His brother's eyes bulged, his damaged hand scrabbling uselessly at Min-jun's grip. You could have been better, Min-jun said, his voice breaking. We could have been family. Real family. Why wasn't that enough? Tae-young's lips moved, barely audible. Because, you got, what should have been mine. His struggles weakened. Min-jun could feel the life draining out of him, feel the moment approaching when one more second of pressure would end it all. His hands tightened. And then Divine's voice cut through the rage, clear and urgent. Min-jun, don't. Please don't. He looked up to find her standing in the doorway, having disobeyed his orders to stay safe. Tears streamed down her face, her hand pressed to her stomach. If you kill him like this, you become what he accused you of being, she said softly. Let the justice system handle him. Break the cycle of violence. For our baby. For us. Min-jun stared down at his brother's reddening face, at the hatred still burning in those eyes even as consciousness faded. Every instinct screamed to finish it, to eliminate this threat permanently. But Divine was right. Their child deserved better than a father who was a murderer by choice rather than necessity. Min-jun released Tae-young's throat, watching him gasp and cough. Anna, get in here. Bring restraints. His second-in-command appeared with zip ties, securing Tae-young efficiently. Min-jun stood on shaking legs and crossed to Divine, pulling her against him. You were supposed to stay in the vehicle. I couldn't let you do something you'd regret, she whispered into his chest. I love you too much to watch you destroy yourself. Around them, the sound of gunfire had ceased. Min-jun's team reported all clear, all threats neutralized. The cost had been high, 7 of his men dead, twice that many wounded. But they had won. Min-jun held Divine as emergency services arrived, as his injured were evacuated, as Tae-young was carried out on a stretcher under heavy guard. The empire he had built had survived, but it felt hollow now, tainted by the blood that had been spilled to defend it. I'm done, he said quietly. After we clean this up, settle accounts, make sure everyone's taken care of, I'm out. No more violence. No more death. Just you, me and our child. Divine looked up at him, hope and fear mingling in her eyes. You mean that? I've never meant anything more. They stood in the wreckage of the warehouse as dawn broke over Los Angeles, 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had survived betrayal and violence and their own dark pasts. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with obstacles and dangers as Min-jun tried to disentangle himself from the criminal world. But for the first time in his life, he had something more powerful than fear or loyalty or revenge to motivate him. He had love. And he had hope. The war was over. Now came the harder battle, learning to live in peace. But as Min-jun and Divine walked out of the warehouse together, hand in hand, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows. One of Tae-young's surviving lieutenants, his face twisted with hatred, his hand on his weapon. The threat had been neutralized. But not eliminated. And sometimes that made all the difference. 3 months passed in a blur of reconstruction and transformation. Min-jun kept his word, dismantling the criminal aspects of his organization with the same ruthless efficiency he had once used to build them. Territory was ceded to rivals under negotiated treaties. Illegal operations were shut down or legitimized. Money was moved, cleaned, invested in businesses that wouldn't get people killed. It was harder than he had anticipated. His lieutenants resisted, unable to understand why the Viper would choose to become ordinary. Rival organizations tested the boundaries, probing for weakness. And every day brought new challenges as Min-jun learned to navigate the legitimate business world where violence couldn't solve problems. But through it all, Divine was his anchor. Her pregnancy progressed beautifully, her belly swelling with the life they had created together. She threw herself into expanding the community center, using the resources Min-jun freed up from his criminal empire to create real, lasting change in neighborhoods that had known only poverty and violence. The community center's grand opening was everything Divine had dreamed of: children laughing as they explored the new computer lab, families attending workshops on job training and financial literacy, teenagers finding safe spaces to be themselves. Min-jun stood in the back, watching Divine give a speech about second chances and redemption, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: pride untainted by blood. After the ceremony, they drove to the courthouse where Tae-young's trial was being held. Min-jun had provided evidence against his brother, carefully curated to incriminate Tae-young without exposing his own operations, and the prosecution was confident of a conviction. Life in prison, no possibility of parole. "Do you need to testify?" Divine asked as they parked. "No. My written statement was enough." Min-jun stared at the courthouse steps. "I don't need to see him again." But they did see him, briefly, as he was led from the courthouse after a hearing. Tae-young's eyes found Min-jun's across the distance, and something passed between them, not forgiveness but perhaps understanding. They were products of the same broken system, two boys who had taken different paths to the same darkness. Tae-young looked away first, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Guards led him toward a transport vehicle, and Min-jun knew he would never see his brother again. The thought brought relief and sadness in equal measure. "Let's go home," Divine said softly, squeezing his hand. Home was a new place, far from the penthouse that had become a symbol of Min-jun's criminal life. They had purchased a house in the hills overlooking Los Angeles, with a yard for their child to play in and neighbors who knew them as Mr. and Mrs. Kim, successful entrepreneurs, not as the Viper and his woman. The transition wasn't seamless. Min-jun still woke from nightmares, still felt the phantom weight of his gun on his hip. Divine still jumped at loud noises, still checked over her shoulder when walking alone. They were both scarred by what they had survived. But they were healing. Together. 4 months after Tae-young's conviction, Min-jun stood in Hannah's office. She now ran the security division of his legitimate business empire, reviewing the final reports on dismantling his criminal infrastructure. Everything had been transferred, sold, or shut down. The Viper no longer existed except as a ghost story told in the underworld. "It's done," Hannah said, closing the last file. "You're officially out. How do you feel about it?" Min-jun asked. "You could have taken over, built your own empire." Hannah smiled, a rare expression that softened her severe features. "I'm tired of war. Ready to protect things that matter rather than destroy things that don't." She paused. "You did the right thing, Min-jun. Not many men in our position have the strength to walk away. I didn't do it alone." "No." Hannah's expression turned knowing. "You had something the rest of us didn't. Someone worth changing for." Min-jun left her office feeling lighter than he had in months. The weight of command, of constant vigilance, of maintaining power through fear, all of it was gone. He was just a man now. Just Min-jun. And it was enough. He arrived home to find Divine in the nursery they had been preparing, hanging curtains covered with cartoon serpents and doves, a private joke about their unlikely love story. She was 7 months pregnant now, moving with the careful grace of a woman carrying precious cargo. "Let me help," Min-jun said, taking the curtain rod from her hands. "I can do it," Divine protested, but she let him anyway, settling into the rocking chair with a sigh. "Our daughter is training to be a kickboxer. She's been pummeling my ribs all afternoon." Daughter. They had learned the sex at the last ultrasound, though they hadn't decided on a name yet. The reality of impending fatherhood hit Min-jun anew every time he thought about it. A daughter. His daughter. He finished hanging the curtains and knelt beside Divine, his hands on her belly. The baby kicked against his palm, strong and insistent. "She's going to be stubborn like her mother," Min-jun said. "And brooding like her father," Divine countered with a smile. "We're going to have our hands full." They sat in comfortable silence, Min-jun's head resting against Divine's shoulder, their hands intertwined over their growing child. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, painting everything in shades of gold. "I need to tell you something," Divine said quietly. "I've been debating whether to mention it." Min-jun tensed. "What is it?" "One of Tae-young's men, the one who got away from the warehouse. Intelligence suggests he's been making threats, talking about revenge." Min-jun's blood went cold. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this." Divine turned to face him. "Min-jun, we can't live in fear. We have good security, Hannah's people are watching, and the authorities have been notified. But we can't let one angry man destroy the peace we've built." He wanted to argue, to retreat into old patterns of control and protection. But she was right. They couldn't live their lives looking over their shoulders forever. Okay, he said. But we're doubling security. And you don't go anywhere alone until this threat is resolved. Deal. That night, Min-jun lay awake while Divine slept beside him, his hand protective on her stomach. He had walked away from violence, but violence might not have walked away from him. The thought of someone hurting Divine, hurting their daughter, filled him with a rage he thought he had left behind. But in the morning, when he woke to Divine's smile and the baby kicking beneath his palm, the fear receded. They would handle whatever came. Together. The threat materialized 2 weeks later. Hannah's team intercepted the would-be assassin before he could get anywhere near Divine or Min-jun. The man was arrested, charged, and sent to join Tae-young in prison. The threat was ended before it could truly begin. Divine went into labor on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks before her due date. Min-jun drove her to the hospital with his heart in his throat, terrified and exhilarated. He held her hand through 12 hours of labor, watching her endure pain with the same fierce determination she had shown defending him all those years ago. When their daughter finally arrived, small and red and screaming with outrage at the world, Min-jun felt something inside him fundamentally shift. He had thought he knew what love was. Had thought Divine had shown him the full depth of it. But holding his daughter for the first time, seeing her tiny fingers wrap around his, Min-jun understood that he had never known anything at all. This was love stripped bare, raw and primal and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. What should we name her? Divine asked, exhausted but radiant in the hospital bed. Min-jun looked at his daughter's face, so new and perfect. I was thinking, hope. After everything we've survived, everything we've overcome. She's our hope for something better. Divine's eyes filled with tears. Hope Kim. I love it. They took Hope home 3 days later, entering their house as a family for the first time. The nursery with its serpent and dove curtains welcomed their daughter, and Min-jun spent hours just watching her sleep, marveling at the tiny life they had created. The months that followed were exhausting and beautiful. Late-night feedings, diaper changes, the constant worry that they were doing everything wrong. But also first smiles, tiny hands grasping their fingers, the sound of Hope's laugh that could light up the darkest room. Min-jun threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he had once devoted to building his empire. He learned to change diapers one-handed, to soothe colic at 3 in the morning, to decipher the different meanings of Hope's cries. Divine watched him transform with amusement and love, seeing the man she had always known he could be finally emerge fully. On Hope's first birthday, they hosted a party in their backyard. Friends from the community center mixed with Min-jun's former lieutenants who had also gone legitimate, with Divine's family who had slowly learned to accept the reformed criminal who had married their daughter. It was messy and loud and perfect. Min-jun stood with Hannah on the edge of the celebration, watching Divine blow bubbles for Hope to chase across the grass. You did it, Hannah said quietly. You actually got out. We got out, Min-jun corrected. All of us who survived. We're building something better now. Do you miss it? The power, the control? Sometimes, Min-jun admitted. But then I look at them and I know I made the right choice. Power is empty compared to this. They stood in companionable silence, two warriors who had laid down their weapons to build instead of destroy. The empire Min-jun had once commanded was a distant memory, replaced by legitimate businesses that actually helped communities rather than exploiting them. But there were still shadows. Not everyone had forgiven the Viper's past. Not everyone believed in redemption. Min-jun knew that somewhere in the city people still told stories about him. Some true, some exaggerated into myth. The specter of who he had been would always haunt the edges of his new life. He had made peace with that. Some stains never fully washed clean. But he could be better going forward. Could raise his daughter to believe in justice rather than revenge. Could love Divine with a purity that transcended the violence of how they had been brought together. As the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Min-jun watched his daughter take wobbly steps toward Divine's outstretched arms. Hope fell halfway there, landing on her padded bottom with a surprised expression. Then she laughed, stood up and tried again. That's my girl, Min-jun murmured. Never give up. Divine caught Hope on her second attempt, spinning her around as the baby squealed with delight. She looked over at Min-jun, her smile radiant with joy and love and hard-won peace. Come here, she called. Family picture. Min-jun crossed the yard and wrapped his arms around them both, Divine and Hope, his entire world contained in the circle of his embrace. Someone snapped a photo, he didn't know who, capturing the moment forever. Years from now, Min-jun would look at that photo and remember this day. Remember the feeling of leaving the darkness behind and stepping into light. Remember the weight of his daughter in his arms and the warmth of Divine's body against his. He would remember that redemption was possible. That love could transform even the most broken soul. That the boy who had once been dismissed as trash had become a man worth loving. And he would remember that every new dawn was a gift, an opportunity to be better than the day before. The Viper was dead. Long live Min-jun Kim, husband, father, redeemed man. His empire was built now on love instead of fear. And it was more powerful than anything he had ruled before. The story could have ended there, in that moment of perfect happiness. But life is never quite so simple. As the party wound down and guests departed, as Min-jun put hope to bed and Divine cleaned up the remnants of celebration, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He almost ignored it. Almost deleted it without reading. But old instincts died hard and he opened the message. The Viper's legacy isn't as buried as you think. Be ready. Min-jun's blood ran cold. He deleted the message immediately, but the damage was done. Someone out there still saw him as the Viper, still considered him a threat or a target or both. He looked in on Hope sleeping peacefully in her crib, so innocent and perfect. Then he went to the bedroom where Divine was already asleep, exhausted from the day. He slipped into bed beside her, pulling her close. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The past might never fully release its grip, but he had learned that the present was worth fighting for. That hope, both the emotion and the tiny human sleeping down the hall, was stronger than any threat. Min-jun closed his eyes, Divine warm and safe in his arms, and let himself drift towards sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new opportunities to prove that he was more than the sum of his sins. But tonight he was simply a man who loved and was loved in return. And that was everything. The serpent had finally found peace. But he remained vigilant still, coiled and ready, protecting what mattered most. Because some instincts never die. They just evolve into something better. Something worth preserving. Something called family. And so the story ends where it began, with Min-jun Kim, once the Viper, now simply a man who chose love over power and found redemption in the arms of the woman who had always seen him for who he truly was. Their journey from that storm-swept hallway to this peaceful home had been paved with violence and sacrifice. But they had emerged on the other side transformed, carrying with them the lessons of their darkest days and the hope of their brightest future. In a city built on dreams and shadows, they had found their light. And it would guide them through whatever storms still lay ahead.